once you're an agent in the FBI, you don't leave. You stick on and you hang on until it's time, because there's a pension. There's other things that are great. But once that retirement eligibility, once I hit that, and because I had joined the federal system and I got credit for all of those prior years, I was actually eligible when I was 49. So it was the year I turned 50. I had 25 years of service. And it was in the year that I turned 50. So I was eligible to retire. And it was at that point that I took the blinders off and I really started to connect with others, talk to other people that were already in the private sector, talk to other people. And I started to take those, like I said, those blinders off and really take a look at the landscape and try to figure out, where do I fit in here, if at all? Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll stick around. But I also had that luxury of saying, I don't really find anything. I'll just stay here.
Right.
Which would have been perfectly fine and acceptable.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. I appreciate you making it out so early in the morning.
Yeah, so I have 3 small kids. I have a 1-year-old.
Lucky you.
I have a 5-year-old. I have a 7-year-old, and I have an 18-year-old daughter. And so I have to shuffle them around this morning.
They all getting close to starting school?
They're all in school, except for Oscar, 1 year. He's in daycare yet. But the other 2, 2nd grade and kindergarten. So I got to just shuffle around because my wife, she heads the daycare. She heads the program. So she's there very early in the morning. Oscar's got to be dropped off at a different location. I got to get my swim in the morning. So, you know.
The swimming aspects, that's something you've done all your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ever compete?
Yes. All the way, probably for better part of 20 years. Yeah. I was not, I would say probably, Division III level, right? So I wasn't really, like any kind of a Olympic caliber swimmer or anything like that. But I use it today for a couple different reasons. And that is, it helps me relax, helps me sort out my thoughts, and gets me going for the day. And so I do that 3 days a week. And then there's a CrossFit class as well.
Got it.
It's just something that I do. And plus, quite honestly, I'm not young anymore and I have young kids and I want to stay around. You know what I mean? And I feel that, quite honestly, and I don't know if this is true or not, but in my own mind, every time I get in the pool, every time I do a workout, it's 5 extra minutes of my life. And so if I can add that up, I'll be around. Yeah.
The one thing from my years when I was doing triathlons that I always used to tell people is swimming's the one exercise that it doesn't physically beat you up. So you don't come out of a workout or a swim and like, oh my God, and so that was always one of the things that in the back of my mind, looking at getting older, is like, oh, if I start losing the ability, I think I can always get back in the water and keep swimming going. I don't swim regularly anymore, but that was the one thing that I always kind of stuck in my head. It's like, it doesn't beat my body up.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great workout, right? Mm-hmm. Full body, total body workout. But without the sort of the stress on your knees and your legs that running would have. This is just my own personal thing. I just don't think our bodies are really made to run for years and years and years with that pounding on the ankles and feet and the knees and everything else and your legs. Swimming is totally different, as you know. One thing that's kind of funny about the triathletes, because I swim with several, the swimming is always the most difficult part for them. And like they can run, they can bike. When it comes to swimming, they're like, is there anything you can show me? Like how you move through the water or, that sort of thing. They kind of struggle with the swimming aspect of the triathlon.
The average person, I would say, and I'll use myself as an example as the average person, until you learn technique you might as well be breaking through a brick wall.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a sport that it's just like golf.
Yeah.
Get from A to B in the least amount of strokes possible.
Yeah.
And until that switch flips in your head, yeah, it's a struggle. I got very lucky when I didn't start out, I'm going to go be a triathlete. I was trying to run, and I was dealing with some running injuries coming out of the academy, and started working with a doctor. And so a friend of mine who was doing triathlons said, why don't you jump in the water, you know, because you already like cycling, you're a triathlete.
Right.
And I was like, all right. And so as I was dealing with the running injuries, trying to get to where I could run regularly, I was in the water a lot. And then I got very lucky because I was spending so much time in the pool, I started meeting people. And then you meet somebody who's a coach, and not any formal coaching, but just, hey, think about doing this, you know, kind of deal.
Right.
And then what's the book? Terry Laughlin's Total Immersion.
Okay.
It was just one of those things. I
thought you were going to say Ultra Marathon Man or one of those.
No, it's a swimming book. I want to say it's Total Immersion. I can't remember. I think the author was Terry Laughlin or something like that. Okay. But you read it, and it kind of clicks that switch of, hey, dummy, it's technique. You know, stop trying to muscle your way through the water.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where it's like I really enjoyed the swimming aspect.
Yeah. What happened to you in terms of you don't do those anymore? You don't compete?
Life, kids. Okay.
Because it takes a lot. I mean, as you know, you can't just get up off the couch and.
Well, and you can't, if you want to push yourself, because I got to the level of competing or completing an Ironman. And so when I got to that level, it's at the minimum end, it's a part-time job. You're putting 20 to 30 hours a week of training to just be mediocre.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I did it before I had kids. I did it when I was working shift work, so I could, you know, more schedule my days easier. Like, okay, I'm going to work the front end of the week. I'll work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I have all weekend to do long runs and long rides and, you know, go do some open water swims and stuff like that. Got to, you know, did my Ironman. Then all of a sudden you have kids, and then you become a detective, and now you're working, you know, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 and trying to find the time to schedule everything. It just, you move away from it.
Well, and to your point, the rec center where I live opens at 5 a.m. I'm standing at the door at about 5 till. I got to be first one in the water because I only have a finite amount of time before I have to, you know, I'm expected to be places. And with my current position, my current job, it's kind of like I was with the FBI almost, because people are always looking for me all the time. And so when you're in the water, they can't get a hold of you, which is good. But you also have to account for the fact that that's happening when you're in the water. And, you know, if it means you got to get up at 4 a.m., means you got to get up at 4 a.m. so you can get in the pool and in the water and then out.
Right.
So you can start your day. But without that, honestly.
And hope that the goggle marks go away before you get to work.
How are they looking, by the way? Is it?
Can't even tell.
Okay, all right. Because sometimes it's a little bit red and round around the eyes. But yeah, without that, that's really my time, you know. And I love being around other swimmers. We got a group of masters swimmers that are there. So I love being around them. And it's sort of my thing, right? It's my time to sort of unwind, if you will, to get the mind right. And, you know, you kind of drift off a little bit, right? And you think about the day, what happened, you think about the day ahead and how you're going to tackle it and that sort of thing. So it's relaxing for me. And when I don't do it, oftentimes when I'm on the road, if it's a longer trip, sometimes I'll bring a suit along or whatever, and then you're like, you know, it was a late night. I don't think I can do it. And I start to feel, I just don't feel right. So I got to have that time just for me. And if it means that if it's dark 30, that's how it's got to be.
And I know for me, coming towards the end of what I'll call my triathlon career, I transitioned to swimming at the local college outdoor pool.
Nice.
Where the chlorine levels were a little bit more moderated, right. You know, and you didn't...
The pool temperature was correct. Yeah.
And they closed down for some remodels. So I moved over to one of the local box gyms. And so now you're dealing with, 7,000 gallons of chlorine. You walk in the room and like your skin starts peeling off. The temperature. They keep the water warm enough for the water aerobics class, but you're like 5 minutes into a swim. You're
50 yards and you're like, I got to get out of here.
And so it just kind of turned me off. Yeah. And then for no other, like I said, just life got in the way and I moved away from it. And I've even mentioned to my wife recently, it's like, I kind of miss that.
Yeah, of course.
But the time commitment, and she goes, well, get back into it. It's like, I don't want to commit the time. I don't want to work on finding the time. I enjoy jujitsu. I've been doing jujitsu now for the last couple of years. And I've really found that is the passion that's driving me these days. I work out in my garage, and so my life works. Yeah. But I do, there's that little competitive bug that just kind of
course there is, right?
Isn't
never
there.
goes away.
No. Yeah. I was thinking about it recently. The thing that I used to enjoy was going and checking in for an event the day before, and you got everybody walking around. Everybody kind of has the same typical outfit, short slides. They get their bib number. Yeah. You check in the next morning, and I mean, not trying to be overly gross, but you hit the porta potties, and everybody smells the same because they all hit the one same Italian restaurant to carb load. Right. But those are weird little things that I remember.
Something for you, honestly, because all of the triathletes that I interact with and swim with, they all have a coach. And it in that circumstance, it's really not really about the money per se, but it keeps you in the game.
Right.
Right. And so that's maybe something for you. If there's an opportunity for that, or somebody comes along, or somebody needs help or assistance, it's a way to help people. But at the same time, have that, I guess, skin in the game still, where you can have that, get that, scratch that itch, if you will.
Did you ever venture into some of the bigger open water swims?
When I was younger, I did a lot of open water swims. I mean, we're talking 12 miles at a time, 16 miles at a time.
Wow. Yeah. Not what I was thinking. I was thinking the 3 to 4 mile, jaunts.
I spent just right before my freshman year of high school. I went up to Canada for a summer, and we probably did at a time there were multiple mile swims. Right. I was a lot younger then.
Training for something specific, or were these races?
No, they were races. But it was also kind of a swim camp, if you will. And so long distance swimming. But that's who I am. That's who I was at the time. That's still who I am. I didn't have a lot of what I would consider to be natural talent, athleticism, but what I had is endurance. And I could keep going and going and going, and people would die off, right? I knew in a race, my events were the 400 IM and the 200 butterfly, kind of grueling events.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes in a meet, they're very close to one another and they had to be done almost back to back. But I would buy my time, right? And I would dive in. Others would sprint it out, and I knew in my mind, I'm going to catch them and I'm going to pass them. And that didn't always happen, but by and large it did. And it was just that endurance factor that I still have. It's harder to maintain at an older age,
right? But
it's still there. And it's something that's where I excelled. That was my thing.
But even when you transition over to open water, you get at least from the way I'm thinking about it, you get a little different dynamic than when you're competing in the pool with lane lines. Right. Because yes, you can move closer to your lane line, and if your opponent is on that same line, you get a little bit of their draft.
Yeah.
But in an open water, you get right behind them. You just tap their foot every once in a while. Just, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here.
You know what's funny? In Canada, I was telling you, spent the summer up there, and they actually had a pool set up. Like, it looked like a swimming pool, but it was in the lake. So they had the lane lines, they had the starting blocks, they had everything. They had the flags hanging up, right, for your backstroke. But you'd be swimming along and there'd be fish down underneath there and everything else. So it was a unique situation for sure. But those lakes up there are so expansive, and we'd just be dropped off. See that down there? That's the other side. No, I don't really see it. Well, you're going to go there. And they had boats and canoers out there to keep track of people. But they ended up being like a 10+ mile swim. So good stuff.
Oh yeah.
Glad I did it.
And that's the thing is, for nothing else, it's memories. And I will still say, of the three sports, the one thing about swimming that a lot of people also don't realize is you got to turn your brain off, especially when you're doing a long swim in a pool.
Right. And
it's just wall to wall to wall to wall to wall. And it's like, I'm not even counting anymore. I just know my watch is going to beep in an hour because I'm doing a long training swim or something like that. And it going along what you were saying, in one aspect, it's great because you are removed. I know now, and I never played around with them while I was doing it, but they've got the waterproof earbuds where you can actually have music while you're.
Some people have those and like them. I don't have them.
But just that, it's a catch-22. Yes, you're out of contact with everybody,
right.
But at the same token, man, if you aren't somebody who can turn off the brain side and or you get overly wrapped up in how many laps have I done? Oh, was that 734? It's you're gonna beat yourself up.
Yeah. So this morning was a good one. I had to get out because I had to be down here, but I still got in 3,300 yards. It's pretty good. So I think right now I'm averaging around 10,000 a week, which isn't bad. It's good. But
for somebody who doesn't swim, that's a lot of yardage.
I mean, we usually do anywhere. We probably get in. We'll do 3,500 yards. That takes an hour with our group. And like I say, it's just therapy for me in a couple different regards, right? As I explained, kind of just drifting off, right? Collecting your thoughts and then being around the others as well. Kind of like back in the old days, being on a team and everything else. So it's good. It's good stuff.
Well, let's take everybody backwards. Where'd you grow up?
So originally from, I used to call it a small town. It's not really small anymore. It's still smallish, but that's Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So kind of known for the overalls that were once made there, no longer made there. And there's also a fly-in show every year where Oshkosh becomes the busiest airport in the world during those 2 weeks. It's called the EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, and it's every year for 2 weeks. It's great. As a kid, I saw all kinds of cool stuff. The Harrier that sort of took off from the ground. The Concorde, remember that? Mm-hmm. Saw that. The Space Shuttle came. The Stealth Bomber when it was brand new. I remember I was mowing lawns at the time. I was just a kid and pushing the lawnmower, and I heard something. I looked up, and where the sound was coming from, I looked where the sound was, and I didn't see anything, but you had to look way ahead of it, right? So it's just really kind of a interesting place to grow up. I'm happy I'm from there. I love going back. I've lived actually in Colorado now longer than I did in Wisconsin, but my family are still there. My sister is still there. My nephews are still there. I love going back. It's a great place.
Were you there all the way through high school? It's kind of your adult life took you out of there?
Yep. All the way through high school. And then from there, I went up to Eau Claire, which is basically kind of a suburb of the Twin Cities. And that's where I swam for 4 years. And then from there on, right?
How'd you get into swimming as a young boy?
So that's kind of interesting. My grandparents gave me a birthday gift. It's $30 or something like that on a card. And my parents, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but my parents said, why don't we enroll Eric in swim lessons? Neither of them, funny enough, knew how to swim. Neither one. And so it was important to them. Hey, we got to get him some lessons. And so they did. And I jumped in, and one thing led to the next. And the coach there at the time, or the instructor, his name was Tom Kanoki. He said, I pulled my parents aside. He said, I think Eric's really got something here. I think that maybe he should try out for the swim team. And I was 8 years old at the time and didn't know anything about it. We said, okay, it sounds good, and tried it. And one thing led to the next, and it was off to the races for, as I say, 20 plus years of competitive swimming.
Were you able to actually leverage it to go to college on a swimming scholarship?
I wasn't.
Oh.
I wasn't. Eau Claire at the time, it's Division III now. It was NAIA at the time. But Eau Claire was the place to be in terms of Wisconsin State College swimming. They were conference champs every year for, it was probably at least 15 years straight. So if you were at that level, which I was at, that was a good place for me. And I chose to go to Eau Claire. I also followed a couple of people from Oshkosh there as well that had gone there.
Swimming into college, though, did you have longer term aspirations as far as the swimming, or was it simply just, this is a hobby that I'm doing while I'm going to college?
It's a hobby, certainly. And it was never anything where it was going to lead to anything larger than that. I wanted to be in a winning program. Chose Eau Claire. They had a winning program. I liked the coach. And of course, I followed friends, just like any high school kid would probably do.
How were you academically?
Not strong. I was not a strong student.
Just not interested in school?
I was interested in school, but that was not my first thing. I mean, I knew that I wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to swim, but the academics were probably maybe third on the list. Hanging out with friends, swimming, being gone from, spreading my wings and leaving Oshkosh and going on to do other things. But the academics was not really something that was really heavily on my mind or something that really motivated me.
Did you have career aspirations for your adulthood?
I didn't at that time. It was kind of funny how my major happened. It was criminal justice. A buddy of mine, as I mentioned,
it's a very difficult degree program.
It's very, very difficult. Very, 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 very hard. A friend of mine had gone to Eau Claire. He's a swimmer. And he said, when I arrived, he said, Eric, he pulled me aside. I've got this all figured out. It's not going to be a problem for you. Got a major. It's called criminal justice. I want you to enroll in it. I think you'd be great. I'm in it. There's a lot of us that are in it. You should try it. I said, that sounds interesting. I will. And a lot of college students, they might waffle a little bit, career aspirations and majors and things like that through college. I never once changed, kept going throughout. It was criminal justice for me, but it was kind of almost happenstance how that actually materialized and happened.
Growing up, what was your parents' push for you? Was college something they wanted you to do? What was the family business? What did your mom and dad do?
So my mother had high school education, maybe 1 year of college, and owned a business, hair salon and makeup. I used to call her sort of the high maintenance mom, but she was successful in that. One business led to a second business in my hometown. And so she did a very good job, worked very hard. And my dad actually was the one who was educated, right? Or at least higher education, college. He had 2 master's degrees. One was in counseling. One was in botany. Strangely
those go together.
They do, really, don't they? But he was the sort of the college push for me. And so, and he ended up being of all things, the food service director at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. There's a university in my hometown. So he oversaw all the meal service, delivery, the meal plans, all of that. That was his thing.
Seems to tie in perfectly to psychology and botany. Let's go have you handle food service.
Right. Well, he ended up, he was overseeing, there was a big residence hall there. It's gone now. But he was the director of the residence hall. And they liked what he was doing there and said, hey, there's an opening over here within the university system. We really need your help. You're very highly organized. We like what you've done here. The residence hall, you've cleaned things up, changed the culture here a little bit. And why don't you go over to the food service? There's a director opening there, and we'd like you to come over. And so he did. And he was there for 25 years.
The old adage, though, it's all about opportunities. It's being in the right place at the right time for somebody to say, hey, you want to try this?
You're exactly right. Yep, you're exactly right. And so that was true for me. It was true for him. It's true for my mom as well. My sister would go on and take over those businesses and then run them. Yeah. So my dad was really, you asked about, my dad was really the push for college.
What year did you graduate college?
So that would have been 93.
And coming towards the end of that, did you start developing a plan for what you were going to be doing after college?
So that's interesting too. As I neared the end of my college time and my swimming, I knew that the swimming was not really going to go anywhere past 4 years of college. And so I started to really think about it. What do I want to do career-wise? I thought, do I want to be a probation officer? Do I want to be a police officer? Those ideas were kind of circulating around in my head.
Was that because you had taken the criminal justice program? So never a thought of doing something like that prior to going to college?
No, absolutely not. And so thought about those things and thought, I don't really know. None of those seem overly appealing to me. There was some amount of excitement that I had that I would have taken those careers on, certainly, but I just felt that there was something else for me at that time. And so I went to see my academic advisor. He was like I guess he was the dean of the school there, criminal justice program. And I said, I don't know. I'm at a crossroads here. I'm not really sure what to do. There are certainly opportunities in the criminal justice system for me to career opportunities and such that are available to me, but I don't know that I'm there yet. And he said, have you ever thought about graduate school? And I said, again, not really a strong student, but maybe I should give it a try. He wrote me a letter of recommendation. And you know, as I said, I wasn't a strong student, but I worked hard.
Right.
And my grade point average was okay. But that letter of recommendation paved the way for me, I guess, to get into graduate school. And I had applied for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. They had a great criminal justice program down there, highly rated. Again, it was within that Wisconsin state system. And believe it or not, I was shocked. I was accepted. And not only that, but I had applied for a teaching assistantship. And I saw it, I looked at it and thought, I wonder if I would qualify for this. And, you know, this is something that I'll talk about later on, probably with you. And that's, you know, never selling yourself short in anything that you do. I looked at that and I thought, I don't know that I really qualify for this, but you know what? I'm going to put in. Lo and behold, maybe somebody else had dropped out. Maybe I was the only applicant. I'm not sure. But it worked out. I got a letter in the mail and, hey, you've been accepted. We want to hire you. And so it wasn't only getting into a graduate level program, but it was also 100% paid for.
Right.
And they also said, when you check in, stop by. We've got a set of keys for you because you've got an office for you right up here with the professors and with the program. And it was outstanding. I couldn't have asked for a better situation.
Was that a 2-year program?
It's a 2-year program. Yeah. Yeah. But during that time, that's when I really kind of honed in. That's when I really started enjoying school, going to class, interacting with the staff. I felt like I was a member of the program. I really started to, again, hone in those skills that I would need that would serve me well later in my career.
Was it with that turning of a corner and really kind of getting into school, did it help solidify what you wanted to do after that? Or was it merely, hey, I'm going to focus on these next 2 years and then I'll decide what's coming after that?
I was focused on that 2 years. And then I kind of was saying to myself, we'll let the chips fall where they will. But a part of the teaching assistantship was oversight of the field placement program. It's a half credit. Kids signed up for the course. and they were placed in the field to get experience, make contacts, and decide whether or not that was the career track for them. And we had all sorts of different agencies, state agencies, local agencies, and federal agencies as well. But the beauty of it was, heading up the program, I had carte blanche of all of the agencies. So I thought, look at this. They need help in all these places. Why don't I sign myself up and see if this is something, see if this is a fit? And the agency that I chose to go with was the U.S. Probation Office in Milwaukee.
Right out of graduating from that grad program?
So I was still in graduate school at the time. So I got the half credit. I wrote the paper and got the half credit, but it was there. And I worked, part of that was a semester. I believe that I worked there actually 1 year out of the 2 years I was in graduate school, but I gave them, it was essentially volunteer time, 2 days a week. And I can remember I had a supervisor at the time, and they pushed a desk into her office, and she kind of just stared at me the entire time. It was kind of uncomfortable, but I learned the ropes, and I liked it. I liked it. And I thought, I'm supervising individuals, but I'm also helping people at the same time.
Adult probation or juvenile probation?
Adult. And I really enjoyed it. And so when my time came to an end, I was graduating. I went to the chief and said, ma'am, I really enjoyed my time here. Do you have anything for me? Could I work here? And she said, Eric, I don't, but I know a person in Baltimore City, and I think you ought to give him a call. And I did. They had an opening. And it was sort of an offshoot from federal probation. It was called Federal or U.S. Pretrial Services. And I called. They set up an interview. They had 2 openings at the time. And I flew out to Baltimore City, stayed with a friend for a couple nights, and got up in the morning. There was a panel interview. There were 6 people sitting there across the table from me, interviewing me. And they hired me. They ended up hiring me. And so got the graduation done, packed up everything in a car, and moved to Maryland. Didn't really know, but maybe one person who lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. But that was my sort of getting my first, I guess, taste of the federal system.
Was that a sworn position?
Yeah. Yes.
And what year was that?
So that was 1998.
And is there an academy related to that position? It's
not really an academy. It's more of a training course. I want to say it's about 3 weeks where we showed up. We didn't stay overnight.
Right.
It was kind of a thing where you showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning. You were done at 5. You drove home every night. And there was testing and things like that. It wasn't a pass-fail situation like the FBI was. But it was about a 3-week course.
When did you start thinking, maybe the FBI is where I want to go?
Oh, you're really fast forwarding quite a bit here.
Is there significant jumps?
There's significant time. There's 6 years when I worked for the U.S. District Courts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So started off in Baltimore City. I was there for 2 years. I became, during that time, what's called a senior U.S. Pretrial Services officer. A lot of words in there. And then I thought to myself, this is great, but I kind of want to get maybe a little bit closer to home. And so I laterally transferred to the Chicago office. And I was in that office for 4 years. Okay. So about, I'm trying to think and do the math. I was there from 2 years in Maryland and then 4 years in Chicago. But during that time, I learned so much. Think about Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's a town of 60,000 people. Not a lot of diversity there. I didn't really have any exposure to working with other cultures. I didn't know a whole lot. When I got out to Maryland, I was very green. But I took that time in Baltimore. I took the 4 years in Chicago to learn about people and about humans. And I would tell people who I supervised, I learned from you. And they would look at me and they would say, what do you learn from me? These are people and individuals that grew up very differently than I did.
Right.
And I would tell them that. I said, you have an interesting life, where you came from and how you grew up. I learned from you. And they were really interested in that. During that time, I also learned another very, very useful skill that would serve me well in my eventual career with the FBI. And that was how to talk to people. I learned how to talk to people. I was dealing with all sorts of individuals as a pretrial services officer. Okay. Everyone from bank robbers to drug dealers to white collar offenders, the whole gamut. And I learned how to talk to people. As I mentioned, that was a skill that would serve me well in the FBI, because a lot of people do ask me, fast forward a little bit, what do you do in the FBI? What is it that you do every day? And I said, it's very simple. I can simplify it. We talk to people. Your success as an agent is really dictated by your ability to extract information from people. Mm-hmm. So if you know how to talk to people and you could just have a conversation, kind of just like what we're doing now, you'd be successful as an agent. And that's what I did during those 6 years with the U.S. courts. Learning about people, from people, and how to talk to people, which served me well, again, in my future career.
But to a degree, in a little more controlled environment, because they were already in custody, or were you dealing with out-of-custody people also?
These are people that were released on conditions.
Got it.
Pending their trial. And one of the things that I did for several years prior to joining the FBI was I supervised individuals who were on house arrest. So they had the ankle monitor. That was a huge learning experience for me as well. And so these were people that were out on pretrial release.
Got it.
So I was dealing with them regularly.
What was the catalyst then to look at the FBI as opposed to staying with this program?
So think about the time frame. We didn't really talk about that, but what happens while I'm in Chicago doing home visits in September of 2001? Okay. Planes crash into the buildings in New York, crash down in a field in Pennsylvania, and also in Washington, D.C. I remember that day vividly. I was doing home visits. I was driving in my car and I was listening to the radio, and some things came on the radio about something that had happened, planes crashing and such. And so we knew that there was something wrong. We didn't know what it was. But that was the catalyst, right, for the FBI. Because after that, it sort of opened the floodgates, if you will, for hiring for the FBI. They were hiring all kinds of people. But I will say this. I had an interest in law enforcement, definitely, as a pretrial services officer. And the interest really started back when I was in graduate school. Remember how I talked about, I really honed my skills at that time. I was really starting to get into the criminal justice aspect and started thinking about a career in the system. And there was another event that happened, and that was Oklahoma City. That was a shaping, and I almost forgot to talk about it because we started talking about the FBI right away. But to back up just a little bit, that was a career shaper for me too, and a sort of a moving event for me. I was a young graduate student. I can recall coming back to my house at the time, turning on the TV, watching first responders pull small children out of the Mira Federal Building. And I sat there and tears just came down my face, crying watching that. I said, if there's anything that I can do to help prevent something like this, that's what I want to dedicate my career to. There's got to be something that I can do to help prevent things like this from happening. And so Oklahoma City was very powerful to me. Obviously, 9/11 was very powerful to all of us. But also at the time when 9/11 happened, I can remember doing sort of the same thing, coming home, turning on the TV, watching in horror, as we all did. But I can also remember hearing a person speak, and there was just a small clip of a person that said, it was an interview, it was a dark interview. Some TV correspondent was interviewing a person, and they said, "We love death more than you love life." And that always stuck with me. And as I saw that playing out on TV, I thought, it's got to be that person. That person has got to be responsible for this. Who says that?
Right.
That person was Osama bin Laden. And I remember thinking too at that time, counterterrorism is my calling. Oklahoma City, 9/11. What's the agency that's responsible for terrorism? It's the FBI. And as I mentioned at the time, after that, the FBI was hiring all kinds of people. And so I jumped onto that and I got lucky. Went through the interview process, which was interesting, certainly. But I prepared. I studied. They told me what they used, the question, not the questions, but how they asked the questions. This is the question that you're going to get, and this is the response that we expect. We're going to give you a scenario. We want you to describe kind of what you did, how you handled the situation, and what the outcome was. And so I thought, what are the questions that they could ask? And I remember preparing for weeks at a time, going over those questions and thinking about my answers. How am I going to answer to their standard within that framework that they provided? And I can remember they flew me to Cleveland, Ohio. I was in a hotel room, 4 agents sitting there. I don't know who they were, but they pushed a tape recorder in front of me. Don't let this bother you. We're going to record it. But I remember, I remember like the questions and my answers was almost like water off a duck's back.
Right.
I thought, geez, I mean, I feel good about it. I feel really good about it. It was a long process, but in the end, you get that letter and you see it. It's from U.S. Department of Justice, and it's only a 1-pager, and you're thinking, oh boy, you can feel it's not thick. You're thinking, oh geez, I don't think I passed, but I did. And so that was 2002 timeframe, and then went to the academy in Quantico from there.
You were a little older going through the academy, but one of the aspects with the FBI, with the requirement of a college degree, you probably tend to get older people going through the academy. But were you still at the top end of the age range?
So I was 30 at the time, and I can remember on day one, it might have been day 2. You're in Quantico, you're at the academy, and you're in your class. And at that time, there was 50 students in the class, 50 new agent trainees. And one by one, we had to stand up, talk about our background and why we wanted to be in the FBI. And as people stood up around the room, there was a veterinarian in the class. There was someone who went to Harvard and had patents pending. And I thought, what am I going to say? U.S. pretrial services for 6 years? Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I said. But yeah, it was I had the graduate degree. I had put in 6 years. But with the FBI, with the thousands of people that are applying every year, you have to do something to sort of separate yourself from the pack.
Right.
And so if it's a graduate degree, and certainly having that 6 years of related experience underneath my belt was really a good thing.
Did already being in the federal government and the GS retirement system, did that help you as far as what level you came in as an FBI agent?
Yeah, it was a 10-10 right away.
So it gave you a little bit of a bump.
Yeah, there was a boost. And plus I used all that time. I started earning more leave time and such way faster and quicker than the others, my counterparts. And so that was a bonus. It was a plus for sure.
Were you able to go straight into counterintelligence?
So completed, that was 16 weeks at the academy. And they had a ceremony. I think it's at week 6 or 7. They have a little ceremony where they call you down and they give you an envelope of where your orders are. And the exercise is you have to guess.
Back to Cleveland.
Yeah. You have to guess where you're going to be placed. I'm Eric Jergenson. I believe that I'm going to be going to Washington, D.C., Washington field office. And then you open up the letter and you're like, oh, I'm going to Denver. So, and there's a map and you kind of put the pin in the map and then you go back, people clap, and then you go back to your seat.
Was there any type of wish list that you submit prior to that?
You do. You rank your choices. 1 to, is it 64 field offices? Every field office you rank. So quite honestly, I had New York at the last. I believe I had Seattle high. I had Boston high. Chicago was high. That's where I process out of in the FBI. You don't go back to where you process out of. So Denver, I want to say, was number 5 on my list. Some people were, I don't know if you want to call it unfortunate, but for them, I think it was their 50th choice.
Did you know much about Denver or Colorado prior to that?
Not at all. In fact, I had never been to Colorado prior to being assigned out here as an FBI agent.
What do you think in the back of your head, or was it not in the back of your head, was very prominent of what rated it? I mean, 5th.
Well, it seemed like a cool thing. It seemed like a interesting city. I was younger at the time. My life was much different than it is now. And I thought, let's give it a shot and put it down. I thought about, I'm really into outdoor activities, hiking, climbing, all of that kind of thing, the skiing. And I thought Colorado has that. Let's put it high on the list. And so it worked out in that regard, certainly.
So there was some consideration beyond just the job. There was some consideration of, hey, I have a life outside of work.
Right.
What cities or what offices are going to give me the best opportunities?
Right. Yeah, there was that consideration. But to be honest with you, when I got to Denver, I looked around and I said, so this is Colorado, this is Denver. What kind of terrorism? I was assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I thought, what kind of terrorism do they have out here? This is a pretty nice place. People come here from all over the world for skiing, world-class resorts. I can't imagine what kind of terrorism we have here. Little did I know at that time that we actually had quite a lot. The history, as I look back in the history of Colorado, we had quite a lot of terrorism connections that touched Colorado that I found out about after my arrival here. Syed Qutb attended college at what is now University of Northern Colorado. Syed Qutb's writings, essays, and a book that he wrote would actually become the underpinnings for what would be Al-Qaeda. He was here for several years up in Greeley, Colorado, and went back and was angered about the way we lived here. And so, kind of an interesting connection. There were others that came through Denver that would be part of or affiliated with at least 9/11. And so there were small connections along the way. And little did I know as well, the FBI's reach when it came to counterterrorism. That from Denver, you could have an effect anywhere in the world when it came to terrorism and countering terrorism threats. And so we did a lot of that, and that was great. It was good stuff.
Were you able to do your full 20 here in Denver, or did you get moved around at all?
So got lucky in that regard. There was a policy in place that I missed by a month where they said, this class and above, we're going to move you to a large office. Denver is considered a medium-sized office.
So you missed it in the positive benefit in that you were not part of that move.
Correct. Some people were fine with it. I liked it here. I wanted to stick around Denver for sure, and it worked out that I stayed here. It's not typical. It is not typical for an FBI agent to remain in one spot for 20 years. But my life circumstances had changed at that point. It was a place that I enjoyed, and I wanted to stick around. Now, did I go places? Did I go on temporary duty? Did I go overseas? Did I go back to headquarters? Did I do those things? Yeah, I took advantage of those things for sure. But I always found my way back to Denver.
Isn't a headquarters rotation a mandatory requirement for the promotional process?
It is. It is. You have to go back to headquarters at some point in order to promote up the chain. For me, I was a squad supervisor. That was the highest that I went. I really I love operations. And the way I see it, the further you go up the chain, the further away you get from actual operations. You get into programs, you really get into personnel issues. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I loved staying connected with the squad. I loved staying connected to ops. That was my thing. So I chose to stick around at the supervisor level, which is a 7-year up and out policy, meaning if you don't move up, you got to move out. And so the last year plus of my career, I had moved out and stepped down to an agent's level.
But so you were able to go, in essence, back down from being
Correct.
So it wasn't like the day you said, I do supervisor, 7 years from now, I'm going to be retiring.
No, that was never. I didn't really know at that point. I was thrilled. I was excited. I was happy to get that squad supervisor spot. And I enjoyed that time. I really did. But I didn't have a plan beyond that. I didn't know at that time. You have to do some prep work in order to become or hit that next level, which is an ASAC or an assistant special agent in charge, would be the next line of a normal progression. And so we did some office inspections and such. You have to get credits, right, to move up. And so I completed those. It was a great learning experience, but I thought, I don't know if this is exactly for me.
Well, and I would imagine once you cross the level to ASAC, do you lose the guaranteed ability to stay in, for your case, the Denver office?
You could be hired as an ASAC in Denver. It's not typical. Usually you leave and then you're gone. It's happened before. We've had a couple instances of it where we promoted from within in Denver. I think personally, from my own perspective, I think it's always better to bring somebody in from the outside. I think they bring fresh ideas, perspectives, thoughts on how to do things. They bring their own way of doing things, which is new. Now, that could be good or bad, but by and large, it's different.
Well, it also gives you the opportunity to flourish at that next level. I don't care how you want to put it. If you've been in an office for 8-10 years and now you're the ASAC of that office, personality conflicts are going to be there.
Right.
So you remove that person from that office, put them in a new one, and allow them to reestablish themselves, maybe without all of the baggage.
Well, you're exactly right. And think about it. If you're an agent and you get promoted, of course, you have friends, You also have people that you may not get along with all that well. And so you're right in that regard. That
the animosity of I should have been promoted over you. I mean, but where that ties into is, and I would, for me, when I look at a career in the federal law enforcement system, is if you and your family are established here in Denver and you put your name in the hat to move up to that next rung, and all of a sudden, hey, honey, we've got to move to Tampa, Florida.
Right.
I'm just saying, that's a huge upheaval of your entire family.
It is. And depending on the age of your kids, if you have them, it's a factor. And so we do see instances of executives moving to Denver or arriving to Denver, either in an ASAC position or an SAC or a special agent in charge, and their families aren't here. Because quite honestly, if you have high school age kids, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave their friends or their buddies. They want to stick around. And so what happens in those circumstances is they'll find a place for them to live. Maybe they'll maintain their house back where they came from so that their kids can continue going to high school and maintain their lives without that upheaval. But over the years, a lot of executives, people that I know, had to move multiple times. It is hard. Some of them even moved overseas for a period of time.
Isn't that kind of considered a, not a hardship position, but basically, I remember when I was assigned to the FBI for a while, there were some agents who took a station in Puerto Rico. Right. Because if they agreed to do Puerto Rico for a year or 2 years, not that it guaranteed them where they wanted to when they came back, but it moved them higher in the list.
Right. Right. You had the ability to go you had carte blanche really to say, I want to go to the following place when I'm done here, which was they needed the assistance. They needed to help in a place like Puerto Rico. And we're going to reward you at the end by sending you to where you want to go. And oftentimes, I think people, by and large, wanted to move back to where their families were at, where they started, just to be back. Because again, as I mentioned, you can't go to the office that you process out of. And typically when you're processing into the FBI, that's where you're from. And so for me, it was Chicago. I wasn't from there, but still, I couldn't have gone back to Chicago right away. I would have had to work my way back if that's where I wanted to go, either through promotion or some other change.
So you did a full 20 years.
Correct.
With the FBI, or 20 years total with the federal government?
So 27, almost 27 in the federal system.
Okay.
So 6+ and 20 with the FBI.
And what year did you retire?
It's going to be 2 years in November of this year.
And how soon before your actual retirement were you starting to plan your transition to the civilian sector?
So I could have stuck around. I really had a positive experience in the FBI. I still love the FBI. I love the fraternity. I love the people. I had a great experience. I got to do and see a lot of things that normally people don't get to experience. I think I mentioned I traveled to places and saw things and did things that I never would have imagined growing up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, that I would ever see and do. And so I was blessed in that regard. And I think in any career that you have, one of the things that people think about is I want to have impact on some level. I want to be impactful with what I do. And I feel that I was able to have an impact. And that was very, very important to me. And so as I look back at my career in the FBI, it was great. I enjoyed it. As I mentioned, I enjoyed being a squad supervisor. I enjoyed everything that we did and the experiences that we had. But I also thought, I've accomplished the things that I set out to do. I feel comfortable with it. I'm retirement eligible. Could I stay another 7 years? I could, but I don't know that I want to. I feel comfortable where I am. I feel like I've accomplished the things that I set out to do here. And I also thought I kind of have 7 years to take to find that next step, that next position. I was also motivated by learning something completely new and different. 27 years in federal government. It was great, but I thought there's something else on the other side. And I want to learn an entirely new thing. I want to learn an entirely new industry, do something completely different outside of what I've been doing for 20 plus years. And it was exciting for me. It was invigorating to me, actually.
I think it's a huge bridge for a lot of us to cross as we get one of retirement age and of retirement eligibility, is coming to that realization, that rationalization that I'm okay with this. I've done enough. I've done everything I can. It's time for me to move on. Unfortunately, there are a lot who just want to hold on to that. Like, I don't want to give this up.
Yeah.
I don't want to give this up. I don't want to give this up. And they go out the door kicking and screaming.
There are a lot of those people. There is life on the other side of the FBI and other careers in law enforcement and elsewhere. And so I was not kicking and screaming at all. I felt like I was in a good place. And you're exactly correct. There were people, my former supervisor, who's a mentor to me. I love this person, and I still see him regularly. He was very impactful on my career. He hung on and applied for extensions. It's fine for him. It's fine for others. It would not have been fine for me. And others also become angry and sullen, and they feel that, the grass is greener. I'm tired of this place. I don't want to be here any longer. And they might jump at something that's not a good fit. And I think that in those circumstances, not all of them, but there is a risk in that you might have just jumped out of your long-term career and made a decision, and it's not as great as you thought because you've forced yourself into it. And people are maybe, I guess, if you will, maybe running from their problems, maybe.
Well, and that's what was kind of in the back of my head when you were saying that, is the people who make those snap judgment and jump, they think it's because it's going to be greener over there, but then they realize it's them that are bringing all of the problems. And so wherever you're going to be, until you fix you, there's always going to be problems.
Right. For sure. That's for sure. And so I was at that point. I felt comfortable. I felt good. I had time. I could buy that time and relax and really try to find the right fit for me and for my family as well.
When you use the terminology, there's life after the Bureau, and were you starting to actively at least open your eyes to other opportunities outside the Bureau before you even made the jump?
Sure.
In the sense of, because of that pre-planning of what you wanted to do, or did you start looking once you realized, okay, I need to find something to go do? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I had reached that point for me. And again, I felt really good about it. There was nothing more that I felt that I needed to do in the FBI. And I thought, now that I'm retirement eligible, I waited until that time before I really started to open up those eyes. As you taking those blinders down, I had the ability to look past the FBI, because once you're in a role, once you're an agent in the FBI, you don't leave. You stick on and you hang on until it's time, because there's a pension. There's other things that are great. But once that retirement eligibility, once I hit that, and because I had joined the federal system and I got credit for all of those prior years, I was actually eligible when I was 49. So it was the year I turned 50. I had 25 years of service. And it was in the year that I turned 50. So I was eligible to retire. And it was at that point that I took the blinders off and I really started to connect with others, talk to other people that were already in the private sector, talk to other people. And I started to take those, like I said, those blinders off and really take a look at the landscape and try to figure out, where do I fit in here, if at all? Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll stick around. But I also had that luxury of saying, I didn't really find anything. I'll just stay here.
Right.
Which would have been perfectly fine and acceptable.
What were some of the initial things that you started doing for yourself to kind of market yourself, start trying to gather information as to where your transition landing spot would be?
So there's a couple things. I think that for my own self, I really had to think really hard about what it is that I wanted to do. I saw a lot of titles. When I started looking, I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know how my skills translated to that position. Seemed like they did, but it's like, Eric, is this really what you want to be doing? Would this job or position be worth leaving the FBI for? And, there's a financial aspect to this as well. Money is not a big motivator for me at all. It is for some, it's not for me. I was really more concerned about leadership. I wanted to do, and again, you really have to think, what is it that I want to do? Number one, because there's a lot of different things out there. But Eric, where do you best fit? And I thought likely in a security role. There's consulting you can do. The sky's really the limit. But I felt, the security industry was probably where I fit. And leadership was very important to me.
How important for you was it to be able to stay in Denver?
I could have moved. Okay. I would have moved. It turned out I didn't need to because of the remote situation that I found myself in. But the leadership was something that was important to me. In the FBI, I had very poor leaders, and I also had very, very good leaders. And I thought, if I'm going to jump out of here, I really want a leader that's going to support me and help me grow into this position, because I'm brand new. I'm like a fish out of water doing this. And so, again, that person you could say, well, you had a great leader, but the person leaves in 6 months. Now that's a risk that you have to take.
Right.
But I looked around and I thought, the leadership aspect is very important to me. And if that leader has been around for a while, good chance that he or she is going to stick around and stay. And so that was probably the leading thing for me, is having good, solid leadership. I was also looking for a role where I could lead others as well. One of the things that was really rewarding to me was helping people to grow and for them to then have opportunities. It's nothing better than sort of shepherding a person along and then seeing them get a great opportunity and you had some hand in it. It's so rewarding. And I wanted that again in whatever position that I was going to assume we call it the other side, I guess. So those things were important to me. And then, that there is the financial thing, as I mentioned. It's not as important, but it was certainly a factor as well.
How long was your job hunt or your job search before you found your job?
Well, I'd say it was probably close to a year, right around a year. Yeah.
And the company you're with today, from the time you applied to the time they made you a job offer, was how long?
I would say it was a good 3 to 4 months. I want to say it was probably 5 to 6 interviews that I did with my current company. It was about 3 to 4 months in total.
Did you find did you have to go seeking it, or did it come to you by, hey, I know somebody, go apply for this?
It came to me through a connection. And so that's one of the things that, as law enforcement officers, as an FBI agent, we don't like to generally put ourselves out there on the internet. I certainly didn't want to do that or like doing that. A lot of people are resistant to having a social media profile. In my own personal opinion, it's absolutely essential to at the very least, let people know, hey, I'm available to work. I'm looking for work. Otherwise, who's going to know? And so that worked for me. Other people don't need that. I did. But having those connections and reaching out and really kind of focusing in on that industry and then narrowing it down further to 3 different companies. Again, this is my Eric's formula.
Mm-hmm.
3 different companies that I felt were a really good fit for me in my situation. I think I've known people, there are people currently that blanket out resumes all across different jobs. I think those tend to be the ones that might be trying to escape or run away. That wasn't me. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to identify in my thing 3 different companies that I felt were, I like the mission, I like what's going on, I like the leadership. These seem to be a good fit for me. And within that, I got to know people in those companies, sort of targeting them. Who's there? Who do I know? Who do I not know? Who do I need to get to know? And contacting them and starting up a dialogue and a conversation. And it really kind of went over quite well. Some of the individuals, some of the contacts I hit sort of cold. Hey, this is me. But I crafted a message which I thought was thoughtful and just kind of putting out there, hey, I'm new, but I'm full of energy and enthusiasm. I love your company. I feel that I could really bring the heat. I could bring the fire. And please, I'm open to talking or speaking with you. If you have time, I'd really appreciate it. And by and large, people responded to that and gave me a call back. Some didn't, but many did. And I still, 2 years later, I still am in contact with many of those people that gave me the opportunity, that actually called me back.
These cold messages that you were sending, what level of within the organization were you targeting? Were you targeting CEO level?
No, basically kind of like people that were involved in running the security program for the organization. Chief security officers, security managers, just pinging them with that message, tailoring it to the individual, looking at their background, and not just sort of saying, hey, will you talk to me? I really took the time to sort of craft that message and for it to put some thought into it so that, I wasn't just sort of just hitting people up randomly, because it's not what it was at all.
And I'm assuming you're doing the majority of this through LinkedIn?
Correct. Yep.
Did you get any advice or did you seek any advice from anyone about starting this process, building a LinkedIn profile, doing these cold reach outs, or was it all trial and error on your own?
I did. There were several people that helped me along the way. Several people. That's how I got on LinkedIn in the first place. Somebody said to me, hey, Eric, you really have to have a LinkedIn profile. I mentioned earlier, I was resistant to that. I don't want to do that. And it really proved invaluable, because there were people out there that I hadn't thought about in a long time. People that had left the FBI, contacts that I hadn't thought about. That's a contact for me. That's somebody that could potentially help me, right? And I did get a lot of advice. And there are people out there, honestly, people such as yourself, that will offer guidance and advice. And I was absolutely floored by one person who took my call, former law enforcement, and had transitioned into the private sector and was doing some really great things, and spent probably close to an hour talking to me. And I said, how much is this going to cost? Is there a cost associated with it? He said, absolutely not. No, there's no cost. And that advice, that guidance was invaluable, and it was free. And I thought, why would somebody want to help me? But there are several people like that are out there that will absolutely help. And they're not looking for it to advance themselves or for any other reason, but they just do it to help others. And when you ask the question, were there people that provided help and advice and guidance? Yeah, Absolutely.
Did you start putting yourself in a social situation of participating in any type of social groups, conferences, anything like that maybe you weren't already doing?
Not really. I didn't. There are certain groups that are out there that I'm a member of now that I wasn't at the time. I didn't do that. It was mainly networking, connecting with others, talking to them about my interests and about what I could bring to the table, making those contacts. I think that submitting a resume coldly on a job offer that comes up, let's say on LinkedIn, the chances of success that's going to turn around and it's going to be an opportunity for you are probably pretty slim, if not zero. But if you have connections, if you have that reach back into the organization and they know you, hey, there's a guy that I just talked to the other day. I spent some time with him on a call. And there were multiple people that chose to call me back. And I told them, I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to talk to me. And remember how I talked about leadership? It's really a question of leadership because it came back to that. As a leader, do you not want to engage with people? Do you not want to find the next person that'll come in and help your organization? Of course you do. And it's those people. They said, well, understand, Eric, of course we want to talk to you because we're trying to identify a person that's going to come in here and do great things in our organization and continue to build the momentum that we currently have. And I thought, that's the company I want to work for right there.
Well, and you've already hit on this point is the total time for you in starting to look for a job and ultimately, retiring and getting another job was about a year. Mm-hmm. The job you have now was about a 3 to 4 month process. And that highlights the importance of, you can't say, hey, I'm going to retire October 1st, so I'll start looking September 1st. You really need to start doing the legwork, developing that presence that other people can find a good year and a half, maybe even 2 years before you're even thinking about, popping smoke and retiring.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the big things that I've taken from you is the fact that it doesn't happen quickly. And sometimes it may be the jobs aren't just going to come fall in your lap. You might have to go look for them.
Right. Exactly. I'll tell a quick story of a good friend of mine who was not in law enforcement. This individual has always been in the private sector and never served one day in the public sector at all. He told me a story where he just got recently, just got a new position that he accepted. And on day one, goes into the office, sits down, supervisor comes in, and the team starts filing in. There's about 10, 12 people around the table. My friend is there. Supervisor stands up and says, you know what? It's a great day. I'm so excited. I want to welcome Eric as our newest member. We're so excited to have him. Outstanding individual, outstanding background. We love this guy. But he's thinking in his mind, kind of funny that you would say that because I've applied to this company 16 times prior and now you're finally hiring me and you say I'm the best things and, in front of the team. It's perseverance. It's sticking with it. If you want to work for that company, go after it and don't be dissuaded by thinking I'm not qualified. I don't belong. I shouldn't apply. I don't want to get turned down. Don't be scared of rejection. You're going to get rejected. And that's another thing that I wanted to mention to you is that as law enforcement, as an FBI agent, I'm sort of used to having my way, right? I mean, I knock on a door, 9 times out of 10, someone's going to open it and talk to me. But along this journey, along this path, along the year that you and I discussed, there's a lot of doors slammed in my face, a lot of closed doors. And it hurts because you feel, am I not good enough? Maybe this isn't for me. You start questioning, should I be doing this? Should I have stayed in the FBI? I don't feel I'm good enough for this. And you feel hurt by it personally. You can't let that get you down. Think about the story that I just told. This is a person that has always been in the private sector. And it took him 16 times with the same company, 17 times, I guess, before they said yes. And he's loving that job. It's his dream job. He stuck with it. He said, I want to work for this company. I'm going to continue to hit you over the head. I'm going to continue to come at you until you give me an opportunity. And finally they did. Think about if had he said, forget this. This isn't worth my time. And he would have moved on. Maybe it would have worked out somewhere else. It probably would have. But he's so thrilled. He's excited. He's thrilled with it.
Right. For you, if you could go back and start doing the process over again, what are some of the hurdles, or I'll put them in air quotes, mistakes that you think you made that you might do differently as far as going into the job hunt and hiring process?
So one of them I already talked about. Initially, I didn't know what I was doing. I did go and I sought some advice and some guidance because I did put out resumes, if you will, all around the place. Wasn't working at all. But that was something where you really ought to focus and narrow your focus in where is it that I want to work and what do I want to do? The other thing that I would say is, and this is a big thing, and I'm sure this has come up before with you, and that is coming from a law enforcement career. I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of cool stuff. It's interesting. It's great. And as I look at a job description, I'm thinking, man, that job just fits me like a glove. It's like a shoe-in. But you really need to translate that experience. There's a speak that we have in law enforcement careers. There's also a speak on the other side. Does it match? Is it learning? Is it like a foreign language to the other side? In a lot of ways and respects, it is. And so I think that in seeking help and guidance from others, you also need to seek help and guidance to translate your experience so that it reflects well on the other side. I have those skills. I have those qualities, but can I put it on paper so that it makes sense to likely the machine reading it oftentimes? But you have to do that. You absolutely have to do that. If I used FBI bureau terminology when applying for a private sector job, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. Translating that experience and putting it on paper so it makes sense for the reader on the other side is key. And I didn't have that right away. A lot is made of resumes. People talk about resume. Oh, you got to have a resume. I don't get so wound up and worked up about the resume. You have to have a resume. It's important. In my opinion, not as important as that networking, knowing people, having contacts and connections. In my own mind and my own experience is imperative. In addition to having a good, solid resume, one that's readable and translatable to the other side, you got to have that too. But people get really wound up about the resume. The other thing that I'll say about the resume, using the same resume and applying for multiple different jobs is probably not going to equate to success. Take the time, spend the time to prepare. Look at what they're asking for. Does your resume reflect that? Yes or no? If the answer is no, translate it once again and make it fit to the job description. Thinking back to my own situation, Eric, I know you have that experience. I know you have that level. I know you have those abilities. Make it fit to the job description. Make it fit for the reader so that when they look at that, they're like, oh, this is the guy right here. Look at his experience and background. We want this guy.
Well, you bring up a great point, and I think that inherently, people in general, but I'll throw the first responder community under the bus, maybe a little bit more. We are lazy. And what I mean by that is you just hit the nail on the head. You do one resume and you think you're done. Well, I've got my resume. And you don't tailor it for the different positions. And then the other thing in conjunction with that is, okay, building a resume is a little bit easier. You got a little bit more time to work it out. You clean it up, you get it to where you like it. And you over rely on that one resume. But in conjunction with that, what I've heard is, because every resume is accompanied with a cover letter or a letter of,
can be, sure.
And not taking the time to write a quality cover letter. I've talked to some people and they say, we get cover letters that say, I'm John and I'm qualified for this position and I would like to apply for your company. Almost that minimal.
Well,
by the way, look at my resume.
Yeah, right. Listen, the cover letter is your chance and your one opportunity to put your best foot forward. Why would you not want to say, look at me. I'm the guy for the job. I'm the person for this job. Okay? Spend some time on it. Take the time to write something that's quality and not, as you mentioned, 2 sentences. It's got to be quality. And here's the other thing. In terms of a cover letter or even a resume, you got to keep it tight. You got to keep it short. I want to say a cover letter, 2 paragraphs, maybe 3, maybe 1. I think that if it gets to be maybe onto the second page, I think you're losing interest level.
Well, because you got to understand too, in a lot of companies, and maybe I'm wrong, there's it may be a computer or it may be just a first evaluator person. And if they don't connect with you right away, you're not even going to move on in the process. And they really don't have a say in the actual hiring process, though.
Exactly. So it's an opportunity. You want to be tight with it, but you also want to put your best foot forward. And so within that cover letter, 1 page, within that resume, 2 pages, make sure it's succinct and tight and overlays well with the job description. Put your best foot forward. And also, don't ever undersell yourself. I certainly would never qualify for a chief security officer position. I'm a street cop. I couldn't qualify for that position. Why wouldn't you apply? If you feel you can do the job and knock it out of the park, why wouldn't you put in? Don't underestimate yourself or undersell yourself.
So today you are a director of security.
Right.
I'll let you plug your company name.
Yeah. So Concentric is who I currently work for. It's a security consulting risk management firm, primarily located out of Seattle, which is where our headquarters is at. We also have offices in San Francisco. We just opened offices in Dublin and Singapore as well. So it's really a rapidly expanding team, a great environment. I feel that it was a lot of people like to use the term soft landing. I don't think it was necessarily a soft landing, but it was a very good landing. And it was one that I'm very fortunate and lucky that I was able to get. Did I work hard? Yes. Did I deserve the position? Yes, I feel that I have. Am I giving them 110%? Yes. Great company, great leadership, and things are going well.
Within the realm of your company and your title, tell me about what are the job functions that you do.
So really with Concentric, one of our biggest programs right now is our embedded program. So essentially we'll do the hiring, we'll pay the benefits, we'll oversee the personnel, but then they go on to work for and with our clients worldwide. That's the fastest growing. That's the biggest program that we have. And our clients love that. And as I say, it's rapidly expanding. With security operations, we're doing everything from travel security and support. We're doing special event security. I also head up our investigations program as well. And so
providing investigative services for outside clients or doing the internal investigations?
Providing investigative services for our clients. Our clients tend to be high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals and families that have security concerns and needs. So they call concentric. Think about what those security concerns and needs might be. Oftentimes they involved security, physical security presence at their residence or their business. So we'll do that. There's also what I call kind of persons of interest, POIs, people that don't go away. And so we'll take a deep dive on them and utilize our law enforcement connections to take care of a problem. And the clients love that. A lot of times, think about if you're an ultra high net worth person, and this is something that I didn't know about. I thought to myself, well, you've got a person showing up at your house. They found out where you live. Why don't you just call the police? Well, that creates a record. And it's oftentimes, well, it's not oftentimes, it's a discoverable record that can be obtained by media sources. So a lot of times people don't want to call the police. And so we'll deal with that problem, that issue in ways that, don't expose our clients unnecessarily.
The sarcastic side of me wants to say, so you just make people disappear, but I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I wish
I could say that. No.
Well, I appreciate your time. Yeah. And wrapping this up, any last pieces of advice for anybody making that transition from the law enforcement side of the house to the civilian side?
Yeah, I mean, in just to wrap it up, and we've talked about this before, I think the biggest thing is the rejection factor. People kind of go out and they do look at that job description and they think this is a job tailor-made for me and my background, but then they'll get rejected. It'll happen. You've got to not dwell on it, but keep chipping away and just make sure that you're prepared. You spend the right amount of time to properly prepare for, think about it, you'll be interviewed as well. You need to start thinking about that as well. Properly prepare, take your time, network, and don't ever see a position or a title, because it's just a title, that you feel that you shouldn't apply for. Apply for it.
I appreciate your time. I wish you all the continued success.
All right. Thanks. Thanks so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. I know that you have other individuals that you could talk to, and you talk to a lot of people, but you took the time to, reach out to me, and we connected, and you wanted to hear my story, and I had the opportunity to tell my story. And, if I can help one person out there, if one person said, that was kind of insightful, it made sense to me, then this was a complete success. So I appreciate you taking your time to allow me to tell my story and to talk with me. And if we can help others in some small way, complete success. I appreciate you sharing your story. But more importantly, for me, everybody's got a different story. And I tell this to a lot of people. You're going to say something that's going to resonate differently with a listener than if I was to say it. Sure. And so I appreciate the fact that you were willing to come in here and sit down and share your story and what you've gone through. So thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.